I have worked as a private investigator for the Vatican for the last 3 years. I began working in the field long before my work with the Vatican, though. Prior to investigating phenomena that the Church couldn't quite explain, I mostly dealt with cheaters and family members stealing from each other. The work was mundane, but the clients paid well. That was until COVID hit, and I almost lost my house due to the lack of work. When it seemed like my life was going to hit its lowest, I got offered a job working for the Vatican. At first, I couldn't believe that the church was willing to hire a private investigator. I had assumed that any investigations would occur internally. However, they wanted an outsider to assist with their most recent conundrum. Before explaining the assignment to me, they sent a local bishop to vet me. I don't know whether it was to determine my trustworthiness or simply to determine if I was a good fit for the job. Hoping to make a good impression, I invited the bishop on my house on Saturday. He introduced himself as Bishop John and we began talking. I'll skip the details of me bending the knee to get hired, but he agreed that I was the right person for the job and gave me the details. A local house had been abandoned 4 years ago when the owner disappeared without a trace. Since then, many teenagers attempted to stay in the house, whether it be for urban exploration or on a dare. These teenagers would often go home to their parents, however, with scratches on their arms, all along their backs, and bruising. They swore it was paranormal activity. Why doesn't the church just authorize an exorcism and bless the house to get it over with? I asked, curious why it was a problem. Bishop John responded saying the Vatican has to confirm an exorcism, which requires a priest to get proof of a haunting. Well, then why do you need me? I'm no priest, I inquired. Bishop John shook his head. We have sent priests to investigate the house. However, there is no evidence of a haunting. It is possible, however, that whatever is causing these hauntings is hiding itself in the presence of priests. That is why we need a person on the outside. I matched his head shaking, clearly hesitant to spend the night in a haunted house, even if the kids were lying about where they'd gotten injured. Seeming to sense my unease, John continued, If you do a good enough job, the Vatican will consider hiring you as their own outside private investigator. You won't get work often, but they will pay for your housing on the condition that you stay on call. My eyes lit up at that proposition. Whether or not I believed in the hauntings, having someone pay for my house while having to do very few hours of work was impossible to pass up. I quickly stood up and shook his hand. You have yourself a deal, sir. Skip ahead 3 days and I was given the address of the house and told where and when to stay. Bishop John gave me his number to call in a situation where I needed immediate help. I was also stocked up with flashlights, portable chargers, bottles of water, and beef jerky to hold me over as a snack. I entered the house at 6:30 p.m. and looked around to get my bearings. The first and second floor had their share of cobwebs, but everything within the house looked modern. When I reached the basement, however, I noticed that the door had a lock on it. I texted Bishop John if he knew of any reason there should be a lock on the door, but didn't get an immediate response. I set up a base camp on the second floor in the master bedroom, which had a king-size bed and a television. I went to turn on the light out of instinct, not thinking about how the house wouldn't have power. I lay in bed for about 2 hours scrolling through TikTok on my phone, and at 8:45 I had received a text from Bishop John that read, I don't know, must have been put on by the previous owners to keep their stuff safe. Now my curiosity was piqued. What could they have kept in the basement that was worth locking the door with a padlock? I got out of bed and worked my way downstairs. The air was choking with dust and the stairs creaked. Clearly no one, not even the teenagers who would sneak in here, had used them in quite some time. Once I made it downstairs, I texted a reply to John informing him I was going to search the basement. I walked my way over to the door and began fiddling with the handle, seeing if there was any way to bypass the lock. I couldn't get the door to budge, however, which led me to search the first floor for something heavy and durable. I eventually searched the garage where a gray Chrysler 200 was sitting. I wondered how long the car had sat there idly. As I searched the garage, I found a pile of bricks. I picked one up, feeling how hefty it was before deciding it would work. I made my way back to the basement door and began smashing at the lock with the brick. After about 4 swings, the lock finally broke and I was able to open the door. As the door opened, my nostrils were penetrated by a vile stench. I had never smelled anything like it and could not determine what could have caused it. I turned on my flashlight, however, and braved the smell, working my way into the basement. The stairs were wooden and open-backed, creaking with each step. It was a smaller basement than I would have thought compared to the house, as it only had 2 rooms. The first room had things a person would expect in a basement, like a fridge and a pool table. It wasn't until I entered the second room that my heart skipped a beat. I entered the second room and found a pentagram drawn onto the floor in what appeared to be chalk. On top of that, however, the smell became worse. I could not pinpoint where it was coming from. Beside the pentagram, there was a bowl and what appeared to be a sleeping bag. I searched through the room for the source of the stench, but could not find it, until I realized it was coming from the wall. There was a heavy bookcase that when I removed a book, I saw that there was a door behind it. I moved the bookcase and opened the door. At that very moment, my flashlight had died. Looking back on my actions, they were not the smartest, but despite my first flashlight being dead, I moved forward into the room. Once I'd entered, I pawed through my bag until I found another flashlight. I wish I hadn't turned it on, though, as what I saw still haunts me. 2 corpses were in the room. I didn't analyze them, as I immediately vomited and began making my way towards the exit. I worked my way through the basement and back to the stairs. As I ran up them, someone grabbed at my leg, and I tumbled back to the bottom. My head hit the cold concrete before everything went dark. When I awoke, I fumbled around for a bit and felt my phone and flashlight. The rest of my gear was gone. The stench was also at its strongest. As I sat up, I heard scraping across the floor. This is when I picked up my flashlight and realized I was in the same room as the corpses. The scraping I was hearing was the bookshelf being moved back into place. I was trapped inside the room until my kidnapper had got on board me and decided to kill me. I panicked, rushing for my phone, realizing that whether I had service or not, I would still be able to possibly call the police. However, when I picked it up, I realized I had no battery remaining. After a few moments of freaking out, I calmed down and began observing my surroundings. I saw the corpses and immediately a wave of panic washed over me. My fate was going to be the same as theirs. My mind raced as I imagined all the torturous ways that man could kill me. As I looked around the room, however, I noticed that there were scratch marks on the wall as if they were trying to claw their way out. Upon further analysis of the corpses, it was evident that one of the corpses had bite marks on their bones. The thought made me nauseous. They didn't die violent bloody deaths. They starved. The surviving member was forced to chew on the bones of the other to survive. Another sudden wave of dread washed over me. If this is how I'm going to die, it may have been better just to be killed. I put my head in my hands and attempted to fall asleep. I knew I'd be stuck in there for a while, and maybe by sleeping I could figure a way out of this situation. I don't know how much time had passed, but I was awoken by sounds of shouts. At first I was groggy and my head was pounding. However, when I heard a voice shout, "Drop the weapon!" my heart skipped another beat. I could have been saved. I began banging on the door to alert whoever was out there of my presence, before I heard the movement of the shelf. I moved away from the door and suddenly it opened. My hope quickly turned to fear, as I saw 3 men aiming their firearms at me. They were officers, and they shouted, "Get on your knees and interlock your fingers behind your head." My heart sank upon hearing their command. I obliged, however, and was put in cuffs. After an hour or so of questioning on the scene, they saw I was clearly a victim, and they unhandcuffed me and called me an ambulance. Apparently, Bishop John had noticed I never replied and called the police, giving them the details about the house and me exploring into the basement. I was down there for about 15 hours. After the fact, I found out that the man who had kidnapped me was a satanic worshiper squatting in the house. He was living in the family's basement, and one day, while they were in the basement, he hid, waiting for them to enter what I would call the prison room. Once they did, he quickly closed them in and moved the bookshelf in front of the door, making it impossible for them to open it from the inside. The police never found the family upon initial investigation, as the bookshelf blocked the door, ruling that they had simply left. As for the explanation of paranormal happenings, the teens probably heard him in the basement. They also probably scratched themselves on some furniture or banged up against something, causing the bruises. The man who locked me in the basement is currently serving a 72-year sentence for 2 counts of second-degree murder and the kidnapping. Bishop John visited me while I spent the next 3 days in the hospital. Apparently I was dehydrated and suffered a nasty concussion from tumbling down the stairs. He told me that the church thanks me for my help and that they are willing to hire me as a permanent investigator for them. Even though my experience left a sour taste in my mouth, I needed employment, so I took him up on his offer. That leads us to 2 days ago, when I hadn't received a single call asking me to do another investigation. Honestly, I thought they forgot about me had it not been for them paying my bills. Today, however, I'm about to go on my second investigation. I will keep everyone updated on whatever happens once it is all said and done. Quick thank you guys. This is an original story written by me. This was maybe written by me a year ago. If you'd like more, I'm working on the sequel over the course of this summer. I will be uploading that to Reddit. I'll leave a link to the original story in my thing. It's going to be a series. Please like and subscribe if you like this story. I had a great time recording it.